Hello, everyone. Good evening. Glad that you are here. My name is Candice Thompson-Zachary, and I'm the Senior Manager of Programming and Justice Initiatives at Dance NYC. My pronouns are she, her, and I identify as a Black, non-disabled woman of Caribbean descent. I'm wearing a white, blue, and black patterned sleeveless shirt. I have brown skin and brown faux locks that are pulled back, and I'm wearing pearl earrings. Behind me is my blurred living room in Brooklyn, New York, the land of the Lenape and Canarsie people. Please take a moment now to let us know the indigenous land where you are currently tuning in from. If you don't know, we'll put a link to the chat where you can research. Thanks for joining us today for Asian American Choreography Tea House, the first event, the first town hall in our 5-part Redefining Practice series. As we are at the mercy of technology, as we have been for the last year and a half, we invite you to extend us grace and patience today. For those of you that are new to Dance NYC, our organization delivers 5 core services for the field: advocacy, action-oriented research, leadership training and convening, technological resources through our website, and grant making. If you want to learn more, please visit dance.nyc. Tonight's program features ASL interpretation from Sign Nexus and the closed captioning services provided by the Viscardi Center. A link to the closed captions is available in the chat, and they can also be toggled on using the CC icon on the bottom right-hand corner of the YouTube video player. Speakers will visually describe themselves, and we will also post speaker information in the YouTube chat and on our website. Feel free to post comments or questions you want to share with the community in the chat on YouTube. Our moderators will be there interacting with you. We will try to accommodate questions during our discussion, but we might not get to them all. If you do want to use the chat, please click on the 3 dots of the chat box header and select Pop Out Chat for an easier interface. And if you could switch Top Chat to Live Chat so that all of the messages appear in order. If the chat box is not accessible to you today, use our voice only hotline number, which is 212-966-4452, extension 1, to submit your questions and comments. We hope you'll help us to amplify today's conversation. Please repost, tag us, share your takeaways on Twitter at DanceNYC, on Instagram at dance.nyc, and on Facebook at dance/NYC. So go ahead now, share the link to the YouTube on Facebook so that we can have some more folks join us. We're using the hashtag today, Redefining Practice, as well as the hashtag Dance NYC Live. I'll now go into our community guidelines for today, as well as our land acknowledgement. Our guidelines are a living commitment and may grow or change to reflect our learning. If you have any feedback for our guidelines or for the programming, please share them in our post-event survey or email info@dance.nyc. Upon participating in tonight's event, in any way you are entering a space of virtual learning, reflection, respect, and accountability that is based on Dance NYC's values of justice, equity, and inclusion. This means that all of us agree to share opinions, challenge perspectives, and engage or debate respectfully, acknowledge or course correct if harm is caused, honor everyone's personhood and humanity, not tolerate speech that is disparaging, abusive, violent, or intended to defame anyone's character publicly. If anyone acts in violation of these guidelines, they will be either warned and asked to course correct or removed, depending on severity. We thank you for your collective agreement to these guidelines to ensure that our space remains safe and respectful for our community today. And let's go into a collective acknowledgement of the land that we are currently on. As a way of deepening our work Unlearning and Racial Justice, we regularly practice land acknowledgements at meetings and public convenings to recognize our country's violent history and its legacy in the space we occupy. This practice is currently under development with the guidance of Indigenous dance artist and activist Emily Johnson to ensure that we embody this allyship. This includes taking actionable steps towards reparations in this initial instance by nurturing relationships with local Indigenous and First Nations artists and organizations, and making pathways for Lenape artists and leaders to return to Lenape Hoking today. I would like to acknowledge that the City of New York is on stolen land, more specifically, Lenape Hoking, the unceded homeland of the Lenape people, who are also recognized federally as the Delaware Nation of Oklahoma, Anadarko, Oklahoma, Delaware Tribe of Indians, Bartlesville, Oklahoma, Stockbridge Munsee Community, Bowler, Wisconsin, and in Canada, Munsee Delaware Nation, Moravian of the Thames First Nation, and Delaware of Six Nations. The Lenape people are the original inhabitants and caretakers of this land and gave Manhattan Island its name, Mannahatta, meaning hilly island or place where we go to gather the wood for the bows. Additionally, as we are gathered digitally and inspired by Adrian Wong of Spider Web Show in what is currently called Canada, I invite us to consider the legacy of colonization embedded within the technologies, structures, and ways of thinking we use every day. We are using internet and high-speed internet and equipment not available in many rural Indigenous communities that leave significant carbon footprints, contributing to climate change that disproportionately impacts Indigenous communities worldwide. We acknowledge that changing these inequities are our shared responsibility, as are our roles in reconciliation, decolonization, and allyship. We recognize that as an organization based in New York City, we have benefited and continue to benefit from the systemic displacement and subsequent erasure of Lenape people and governance on their land. Please join me in taking a moment to reflect and recognize the centuries of violence, displacement, forced migration, and settlement here, as well as the centuries of resilience and leadership of all Indigenous and First Nations peoples on Turtle Island that have led to our presence and livelihoods in New York City today. Thank you. Continuing our practice of recognition, we would like to name openly the legacies of the African slave trade, migration and immigration patterns, the disability rights and disability justice movements, and the LGBTQIA+ fight for justice. These areas and tactics of oppression through which white supremacy and settler colonialism have enacted and sustained its power over time are not the only areas, but rather the main focuses of Dance NYC's ongoing historical acknowledgement practice and justice, equity, and inclusion strategy. We have continued to witness as a nation and a city the palpable impacts that systemic racism has had on the lives of Black and Indigenous people, peoples of color, immigrants, disabled and immunosuppressed people, LGBTQ+ people, and those living in low-income communities and poverty impacted by COVID-19. White supremacy continuously manifests itself in violence at the hands of law enforcement and in interpersonal interactions, our government's response to COVID-19, and our cultural institutions. Finally, we acknowledge and mourn all people whose lives have been violently harmed or taken by the actions of white people, institutions, and systems, and the many accomplices, witnesses, and beneficiaries of white supremacy who have actively participated in or stood by and observed in silence. Let's take one more moment. And now that we have that context and table set, let's start off the Redefining Practice series and tonight's conversation. This series focuses on the evolving landscape for dance as professional practice, living ritual, and technical production. Through the next 5 events, we will collectively explore how artists and institutions are adapted, unlearning, and innovating new ways of being in creation, and the many phases that creation takes to prioritize new learnings in racial justice, physical, emotional safety, and community care. Through each event, we will be conversing with distinct communities and cultural groups, and as with most conversations, who is represented here is not the entirety of any particular community. We hope these gatherings can be the starting point for more conversations and more perspectives to be shared in the future. And with that, it's now my pleasure to pass the mic to Phil Chan, who will introduce our featured speakers and moderate tonight's conversation. Phil curated today's event and is the co-founder of Final Bow for Yellowface. Welcome, Phil.
Thank you so much, Candace. Good evening, everybody. My name is Phil Chan. My pronouns are he, him. I'm calling from Lenape land in Long Island. I am an Asian American man wearing a floral shirt with a window on my right as the sun is setting outside. I am so honored to be here with Dance NYC tonight to talk about the Asian experience in dance making. When Dance NYC came to me, I wanted to share with a cross-section of choreographers working in various different aspects of the dance field to see what we as audience members could draw in terms of parallels in terms of their experiences, any similar barriers that they face, as well as maybe providing us with some constructive solutions on how we can be more equitable and support Asian American dance artists. So I'm going to go through and introduce each one of them. I hope all of you have had a chance to watch some of their video samples in the emails that have gone out, because I would love for you guys to be able to experience the work of each of these incredible Asian choreographers. Let's start. Let's see who's in my Zoom. Keerati, do you want to start us off?
Hi, can you all hear me? Awesome. Hi, everyone. I'm Keerati Jinakunwiphat. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a Thai American woman. I'm a navy blue headphones. I have a green crop top, an asymmetrical top on, blue jeans, green socks, and I'm sitting by a window overlooking the water. And I'm currently on Lenape land as well. Yeah, thank you, Phil.
Thank you, Keerati. Naini?
Hi, everyone. I am Naini Chen, pronouns she, hers, and I am the artistic director and choreographer of the Naini Chen Dance Company, which I co-founded in 1988. I'm a non-disabled, cisgender Asian American woman, and I'm speaking to you from the state of New Jersey, the occupied land of Lenape people. Today, I'm wearing a blue collar shirt, a pair of pearl earrings and necklace, and I have dark black hair. It's been pulled back. And behind me, there is a Chinese painting with purple flower and bird hanging on the wall. Very happy to be here. Thank you.
Great, thank you. ZJ, Zhong-Jing Fang.
Hi everyone. My name is Zhong-Jing Fang, and I pronounce myself as she, her, hers. And I am from China, currently living in New York City. I am a soloist ballerina with the American Ballet Theater. And I'm wearing a flory romper with in my apartment in Astoria, New York, with a window and a mirror in the back.
Fabulous. And last but not least, Annie.
Hi, my name is Annie Heath. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am wearing a gray hoodie or sweatshirt with a lightish yellow white background. I am a non-disabled Korean American woman. And I'm currently residing in Connecticut on the land of the Golden Hill Puggasset territory. Yeah, excited to be here. Thank you.
Great. So if we were in person, we would probably all be sitting around my hot pot, as the weather is getting colder, having some good Chinese food together. So what I'd like the format for tonight's discussion is to really hear all of you guys talking to each other as if we're just getting together around a dinner table. So if everyone wants to come back on camera, please. I just wanted to start us off by thinking about what it means to be an Asian American choreographer. And I guess in thinking about that definition for myself, it is a choreographer who is making work, who has the lived experience of being Asian American. That seems to be a pretty encompassing. So it's our lived experience being Asian American and how it informs our work that makes us Asian American choreographers. So I'd love to start with posing a question to you ladies about, what is it, how does your Asianness, come out in your work and informs your practice that may be distinct from somebody else who is not Asian?
This is Annie Chen speaking. Thank you for the question, Phil. For me, I think I am an immigrant artist. I'm the first generation immigrant. I moved to this country when I was 22. The reason I decided to come here was because when I was 18, I began touring to the continent of America, representing Taiwan government. And I really had the chance to perform on Broadway in Minskoff Theater for 1 month at that time. And I witnessed how vital, the energy of the dance scene in New York. And it's so colorful. And then I just see people walking like on the street with different colors, different cultural background. They speak different language. And it was just so inspiring. I think there is a drive in every spirit. Everybody's carrying the spirit moving forward with such a strength. And I think that really inspired me and made me decide to move to this country. But of course, because of my background with I began my training in traditional Chinese dance when I was 4 years old. And then when I was 13, I began heavily trained in the Western style of dancing, modern, grand technique, and ballet and jazz when I entered the performing art school. So naturally, when I moved to this country, I, began to explore the identity. Who am I really? How am I different than other people I see in New York? And how can I build myself as artist, which is unique. And then, it took me a few years. I went to NYU first, tried to kind of abandon my tradition, just put it on the side so I can absorb like a sponge, just like absorb new information, new ideas, new styles of dancing. So I think the first 2 or 3 years, I was busy doing that. But then after that, I began thinking, maybe I should close the doors and to go inwards, to really ask myself, who am I? with so many years of cultural background, growing up in Taiwan, the traditional Chinese philosophy, the thinking, the training, the aesthetics, the dance, the background. And that's really strong part of me. And then I need to bring that out into my work. So I experiment, and then I decided to start a company because of that, because I am unique as who I am as Asian American. And I do need to show that part and share that with the white American people, So naturally, the traditional philosophy and the thinking, the aesthetics, and it's all naturally blending into my creation. I think the first key word for me, I kept that really in myself throughout my whole career, is be myself. You cannot deny who you are, and be true to myself, be honest to myself. And, I'm not a trendy person. I'm not trying to follow what's popular out there, what's trendy out there. Just be myself and be honest to myself and to create with that mentality. And I think that's when you say Asianness, I guess that's naturally in me and in my work already. I hope that it's a short answer to your question. Thank you.
I guess I could take it from there. Thank you, Annie. I guess going off what she had said as well, with be yourself, because I feel like I even come into this talk and I'm like, oh, I'm maybe nervous about it. I'm here representing, that could be so much pressure. And that's the point, right? And I try to be honest and show that in my work as well. I feel like my experiences show up in my work as an Asian American, kind of the duality of it all. I feel like my individuality as an American shows up in my work and kind of balances this kind of communal group work that I like to put in, which kind of comes from more of Asian culture. I think there's a lot of support and family there that I kind of pull from. So having those two things coexist in my work. Yeah, that's all for me.
Yeah, it's interesting hearing from all these people and all women that I've heard of and have known distantly. So it's great to be in conversation. For me, I guess some context as well is needed. So how does my Asianness come into my work? I am a Korean American transracial adoptee, which means that I was born in Korea and I was adopted by a white family in the US. So I've lived here my entire life. My experience as an Asian American has been one of always knowing the differences and always seeing it very clearly. And growing up, I grew up in upstate New York. It's very, very white, small town. Everyone knows everyone. I was in the same grades or same classes with the same people most of my life. And so kind of moving into school and then coming to New York, similar to 90, was just kind of like a wave and explosion of excitement and intrigue. I was so inspired by how other people have explored their culture and their heritage and their work. And, I think as a dancer growing up, I always thought I was going to be a company dancer, and lo and behold, that never happened and it really isn't of my interest. But what it led me to was really wanting to explore dance making and just the process of it. And when I started working with a small group of friends, and I realized I had no idea what to say or how to articulate what I wanted. I felt like I was looking at not necessarily what's trendy, but looking at what's around me and seeing what I'm interested in. And, after 1 to 2 years of doing this with friends, I realized I'm wasting their time because I don't even know what I want. So that led me to really delve into my own creative practice. spending lots of long hours by myself in the studio without much guidance. And, I think what I've realized is that I'm not really interested in trying to say or be or present what people want me to say and do and present. But at the same time, the questions I'm asking happen to be at the forefront, I think, of the direction of a lot of contemporary dance making or experimental dance making. So I feel like a lot of my experience of being a transracial adoptee and how it comes out in my dance making is through the not knowing, through the inability to fully articulate. It comes in these pieces, whether it's from movement or text or images or letters or documentation, and it all seeps down eventually to this space of creating like memory work that isn't real memories. A lot of my work is exploring what is not there and the lack of, and what do we hold on to when we're processing all of this information and building our own personal narrative. So I've been really interested in exploring, I'm calling it Wombwork, and it's really just taking time to embody and imagine what it would be like to be in the womb with my birth mother, the only time I was there. So is that through the sounds or the smells, or like what does it feel like? What is the temperature? So that is primarily, I guess, how my Asianness comes into play, is the lack of knowing. So yeah.
I think it's so interesting that your story also highlights part of the Asian American experience that might be less visible, because they just sometimes see us and they don't really, people might not understand the nuance that not everybody is from over there, that we all come here and we all might look a certain way, but we all have different degrees of relationship to this idea of Asia that people have. So I think this is very interesting to hear the differences in how you're approaching the question of Asianness. ZJ, anything to add to that?
Yes. I just was thinking about, while everyone's sharing their journey, I was just thinking about my journey as a choreographer, and was pretty much an accident. Like, I didn't plan to be a choreographer. It was based on an ankle injury at the time in 2009. Then I happened to join a female choreographer workshop through ABT. And then from there, I was given opportunity to do an incubator with the company. Now I look back, that was my very first piece in 2011. And the piece called The Final Frame. And I actually did use Wang Jiawei's film 2046, one of my favorite films, music, their theme music. And I used that music actually like from the beginning and then ends with that music. And just looking into the journey, like all the pieces I have created, rather like a contemporary piece, or it's sometimes I use a French singer. I like different music, but at the same time, everything I have created that has something to do with where I came from, my Chinese heritage. And it's in everything. It's in the food I'm eating, the gesture, and the philosophy, the meaning behind, because Asian has so much knowledge, like Confucius. So everything I'm creating that is based on that sense of energy. So all the movements, if you have seen all the movements, I'm watching myself, that has that, it could be abstract, but I love that there's something that's so part of me, that's so individual. And it's quite amazing experience. Yeah.
So I think one thing that we all also have in common is that we are not Asians in Asia. We are people of Asian descent here living in the minority. And I'm just, you all represent sort of different corners of the dance world. And so I'd just love to hear about just your general connection to Asia. Are there expectations of you as an Asian person that your work has to look a certain way or feel a certain way or are on certain themes? I'm just curious because even though you're in different dance fields, I'm curious to see if there might be some parallels across what the expectations are for us as Asian artists.
This is Annie Chen speaking. I guess, a lot of people look at Asian, they think they're all the same. And, they have no idea that there are so many countries in Asia, and not to mention that we are, here is our home, right? This US is our home. And I remember very interesting when I was, for a short period of time, I was touring the musical The King and I to the Midwest. And then I remember in our cast, there are a lot of Asian Americans. They were born, raised here. And then they were like, we were walking the street and there's an old lady came approach us and they made comment about those two friends. And they said, "Oh, your English is so good." And they were so offended because they were born and raised here. They are American. They are American. So I think one thing about this whole thing about how how people expect to see our work. They see our face already. Okay, that's one already like the expectation. Okay, and then just like my friends' experience, they just assume that you're from another country. You're not here. You're not American. And the second thing is the name. When they don't even see you, but they see your name, then they kind of connect you with you're foreigners, you're not American. And they have certain expectation, like for me, for example, especially I don't have American name. I kept my Chinese name, Naini. Naini actually means rainbow, Naini Chen. And so, doesn't matter presenters or, when they hear my name, they always expect me doing traditional Chinese dance. And that's how much they expected me to do, not just a mix of contemporary and traditional. They expect me to present traditional Chinese dance. And I think that's really a battle that I've been fighting against for a long, long time. Especially in this country, I think that people like to put you into a box. Are you a traditional dance company? Are you a contemporary dance company? Are you, they label you and put you in a box. And so that's what I've been fighting for a long time. Because for me, as I said, immigrant artist, I have so much background in my own tradition, but I also have a lot of experience. And I moved to this country a long time ago, so I've been spending my life here much longer than in my native country. So I'm also a very contemporary person, and then my work is about the current issue. It could be about the global issue. So then my argument is that when the presenter asks me, "Are you traditional or modern?" It cannot be both. And then my argument is that why not? And that's who I am. Why can't I do both? I love my tradition. I honor it. I'm not going to abandon it. I'd rather to finding the foundation, using the strength and then the treasure in the tradition and make that blossom in my contemporary work. So that's my answer to those people who question me. And that's the battle I've been fighting, and that's the work I will continue to be doing. Yes. Thank you.
But doesn't that, isn't that what any artist who is sort of working within their culture, as if that would be possible to not do it that way. But it's like we take what, you know, the previous generations have given us, and we play with it, and we have to make it our own. We have to, you know, so maybe the sword dance is from 5,000 years ago, but you still have to make it for today, for you. And as an individual artist, you still have to put your own signature within these rules. So, but it sometimes maybe it feels like we forget that we're also contemporary artists in that way, that just because there's this tradition that we're somehow just replicating something that came before, as opposed to actually, no, we have to be creative within this form. You know, as it's the same way that a ballet choreographer says, okay, here's your steps, you have to make a new ballet, but only with these steps. You know, we're doing the same thing with our, you know, in your case, in our cultural artifacts.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, because people not aware of cultures evolving, you know, every day. Even the Asian cultures evolving every day. So, but people had this misconception about, like, when you mention about Asian, that means old, that means backwards, you know. It actually, you know, we are evolving every day as Asian American. And then in another continent right there, the Asian artists, they're making work. It's evolving every day over there as well. Yes.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that you say that, because on the flip side, I feel like my experience has been that people expect me to be making cultural work. And now that I'm dipping my toes into more identity work, I feel like people perceive me or have this expectation of that now I am an identity work artist. And I feel like it has pigeonholed me into this space where I know what the funders want to hear. I know what the presenters want to hear. I can write to it and I can articulate it in a way that makes you feel like I am checking off some box on your institution. But ultimately, I think it's really harmful to not have the artistic liberty and freedom to meander in what you're doing. Sometimes I'm really interested in learning about Korean history and seeing if any of it like connects to what I'm doing. And at other times it feels so distant and fraudulent that like I can't even put it in front of me. So I think it's difficult when thinking about the dance field in general, and then kind of also in our own areas of dance making, of the expectation of people wanting to see something out of you that you might not be creating, and it doesn't make sense. So I've been battling that a lot with my writing and experience of being on grant panels too. I even sense my own bias of how I review things. And there have been times where I'm reading something and I'm like, oh, I wish that was more this way. And that's not the point. Like, you should be looking at the project for the creative value and what it is adding to the conversation, and not necessarily always trying to connect it to something that you have this expectation that you want to see.
Hi.
Go ahead, Keerati.
Sorry. Hi, Keerati speaking. And to kind of contrast Annie's experience, I feel like people actually don't expect me to make work about my Asian experience or Asian culture necessarily. Which, I mean, it didn't matter. I was gonna do what I was gonna do anyways, you know. But because of that, I do, as I'm growing in different ways, I want to explore that part of myself more. But I think it's a thing where Annie, like you said about it being fraudulent or having some kind of distance from it, and even Annie's point to it, Asian culture being associated with something older. And to me, that also feels more sacred and vulnerable. So I kind of am hesitant to share in a way, but it's like I want to use and have been using that ancestry and that experience to kind of have inner work for myself and see what comes out of that and how I grow individually and then apply it to my work, if that makes sense. I kind of use it as a process instead of, I don't know, kind of displaying it in such a way. If that makes sense. Thanks.
Go ahead, CJ.
Yeah, I was just thinking, it was so many wonderful points from Nani and Annie. With me, I definitely recognize that I was given so many opportunities over the years. I've been choreographing for more than 10 years now, but none of the times somebody came up to me and say, can you create something that related to your heritage or related to your background? People seems expecting us to create something that how we look as, for example, I'm a ballerina, so everyone want to be a classical ballet, or even if it's contemporary, it has to be on point shoes. So I never thought about that until actually today with this conversation, which is really wonderful. I started to realizing my choreographing way is starting getting narrower and narrower. So I tend to, if I have the next opportunity, let's say, I tends to be, okay, it has to be point shoes, has to be this way. And it's not, I don't think it's our fault. I think it has to do with what people are expecting us to do. But it's also very special for us to talk about this, because it had to come from us to starting changing what the audience want to see. And so I think I'm going to really starting thinking, what can I bring with what I already have brought on the table. We do have so much, we might don't realize how much we have from our Asian culture, even if we're from, was born and raised in America. I think we as Asians have seen so much with the culture, and there's so much to give, and we have to be the first one to face it and to really dig into that richness. Yeah.
Yeah, Nani, do you have any advice for these choreographers about this feeling of fraudulence or like a disconnection to the culture? I mean, especially as an immigrant, as somebody who trained, in China and then came here, I think you probably have a lot of confidence in in that connection. What advice would you give to other choreographers? And I think this also relates not just to the Asian experience, but I think a lot of Latinx and Black choreographers also question their connection to someplace outside of a homogenous white space that they're inhabiting. So any advice for us about how to deal with that feeling of fraud, or that you're taking something that you're not necessarily 100% connected to culturally, to use that as inspiration in your work or as a theme in your work?
Are you referring to someone like Zhong-Jing and myself? Like we were not born here, or in general to the choreographer who were born here,
and then just choreographers in general, about
in general
having confidence about using your own heritage,
right,
and feeling like you can or you're allowed to.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for the question. I remember when I first started, I think I was lucky because in 1990s, I think cultural diversity was in at that time. And all of a sudden, my company got a lot of work. We toured to like so many states, like over 30 states in this country, because the cultural diversity was on the way up. All of a sudden, there were like slots open, for the Asian American companies as well, for Black, for Latinos, for for us, and even for a Native American dance company. I remember at that time there was a American Indian company was touring like all over the country. So I guess that helped me to build the confidence to show my heritage because it was presentable. The presenter look at it, probably because they could get funding. They could get funding for presenting those minority companies. And I think that's a big reason, right? Funding is always the key issue. They can get funding, so they give us opportunities. But then later, it's not forever, and then afterwards, then when the economy was down, and then, we as Asian, we are very often, I say, we are the minority of the minority. We are such a small group. When they started to cut the funding for a presenter to present a culturally diverse group, then we are the first one to get cut. And how do you continue going and still keep what you're doing and be proud of your tradition? And then, or even if you feel like you're not really connecting to your tradition that much because you were born and raised here, I think, just be confident and keep doing what you're doing. That's what my advice is. I know a lot of times it's very political. You have no funding. How can you continue? Okay, if there's no request for you to perform or to create work, and how do you go? But I think it's like what Annie said. It's in your blood. Again, you had this desire to search who you really are. And I remember I was reading your application for I think the Asian American, what's that? Or you got funding, right? You got a word for it. You got selected, and you were saying that you want to go back to Korea and to search for your identity. And I think that's such a great thing. When we as panelists and we read your application, we just felt like, okay, she is searching for her roots and then finding that uniqueness. And then maybe you can bring that richness back to your work and to contribute to this wide, the big picture here in America, the kaleidoscope. I call it kaleidoscope. Or my friend puts it as mosaic. The dance world in America is like a mosaic. It has many colors and put it together like a collage. And I always view my heritage as treasure. I think that's how it makes me unique, and how I can contribute to the dance world here. We can, make that color, add that color to the kaleidoscope, add that color to the mosaic here in the dance world. So I think number one is to really respect your own heritage and who you are. That's the number one thing, especially as Asian American with such a small group. If we don't respect ourselves, who else is going to respect us? So I would say that's the number one advice I have for everyone. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for that. We just have a couple comments in the chat that were interesting. Some folks were mentioning this idea that something is frozen or defined as put forth as traditional in opposition to contemporary feels very violent, and talking about some of the challenges of saying that if something is traditional, it's forced, and so finding room for other ways to talk about that. Somebody else also talked about sort of how can we eliminate some of these categories and boxes to give us a little bit more creative freedom. And I wanted to bring up some of the contradictions that this brings, that this topic is. So it would be lovely for us to eventually move beyond saying, oh, we are Asian American artists. We'd like to be seen as just choreographers. At the same time, if we look at the field, we don't see equity for people who look like us, right? We aren't seeing Asian artists getting the same commissions or getting the same resources or opportunities. So yes, it would be nice if we were seen as, not in a box of being Asian artists, but also there, as it sounds like we're unpacking, there is a richness that because we are Asian American, we have a unique perspective that should be heard. So how do we make space for our specific worldview, our stories, without having a box for us, without saying, let's make a conscious space to say, okay, we need to have an Asian American choreographer. So what do you guys think about that, that sort of catch-22?
Well, I mean, I think it's interesting how, for me personally, just as an adoptee, we're even a smaller group probably, although pretty large. And it does feel isolating to be creating work that is exploring the Asian identity, but in a way that probably a lot of Asian American dance community might not relate to. But I do believe in the power of a collective group in art making and everyone's individual voices, and staying on the path of like what you are interested in and like what you bring out of yourself or of other people as a choreographer. And it is the collective of all these individual perspectives that build history, that contextualize movements. And it might not feel like it right now, but I think in the long run, the more voices that we have, the more voices that are creating from different perspectives, it builds, like you were saying, like a larger kaleidoscope, a more beautiful tapestry of our collective, but then also very distinct differences.
Can I say something? I definitely felt that it is so important to push our Asian American choreographers on the platform like ABT, New York City Ballet. We seems like Annie said, it seems a little bit isolated. You have one group here, one group there, but the voice is not being heard through a bigger platform. For example, like I felt with myself, people has liked my work, but there isn't. They would ask me to create something, but there isn't a promotion from it. There's not like, we really like your work and we want you to do a full-length ballet or something that's more being acknowledged. It's just, so I definitely felt there's like a pushback on us that we, at a time, I can tell all of you guys are very mature choreographers. But I felt like if there's no coming forward, then it feels like stuck. So we need to have that kind of opportunities to put ourselves there, and not worrying about if people like or not, and that's what art is supposed to be. I felt like has to be accepting everyone's authenticness, and that definitely for us it hasn't been there yet. Yeah,
I was reading this article in the New York Times. I was circulating around to a few friends. We were about mediocrity and sort of the pressure for people of color to have to make something excellent, because if you don't, then an opportunity like this won't happen for somebody who looks like you for a couple years. So there's just like this added pressure. Or if you're a woman, like it has to achieve a certain level, and we can't afford to be just okay. It has to be brilliant, or else, that's missed opportunities for other women, et cetera. So, and because of that extra pressure of thinking, we actually make our best work creatively when we can move forward without fear. So if we had this extra pressure of fear, it's actually setting us up to not succeed somehow than if we just were allowed to make work and the stakes weren't as high. So especially as a lot of folks are breaking barriers, that seems to be a common thing. But ZJ is also bringing up this other barrier, and I'm resisting the term bamboo ceiling, but this barrier of like we don't get past a certain point. What does that look like? And maybe what are some constructive solutions that the folks listening, like how can we address some of these barriers that you face? So maybe perhaps it'd be nice to hear you identify some of these and then how we can talk about it. So one of the things ZJ mentioned was having this, like a lack of progression, like you're making pieces, but you're not building bigger things or larger opportunities. It's just like you always get the little bone thrown to you. So what are some other barriers that you guys have experienced, and perhaps some constructive solutions on how to address them?
I think, Phil, you're so right about we have to work extra hard. We have to be better and work harder in order to, reach to certain point, and a lot of time, excellent artists like Asian American artists, you deserve more recognition, but then you just don't get it. I think that applied to other ethnic groups as well, maybe not just Asian American. And how can we be included in this bigger picture, the mainstream, we call the mainstream dance world, but not be labeled or put in the box of you are the Asian American, you're the minority group, So I think that's a battle. That's a battle that we have to continue fighting, and then maybe like what Annie said, collective of effort, and then we just keep doing what we're doing, just don't give up and keep fighting, keep creating. I think good work is very important. We have to really do good work, work hard and then good work. And hopefully the situation will change. It's going to take a very long time. It's not going to happen tomorrow. But if we don't do it, then it's not going to happen. But if we keep doing it, maybe we are laying down the path for our next generation, future generation, and then they will succeed. Yeah, that's just how I feel. Yeah.
I'm interested in seeing how the relationship between artists and presenters develops over the coming years. From my experience as like an independent artist that works on projects rather than set things that happen throughout the year, it feels like a lot of the burden is on the artist to reach out to the presenter, to develop this relationship with the presenter for 5-10 years before you get anything in return, whether that is like a work in progress showing or a presentation somewhere. Like you really have to develop these long-term relationships with certain people. And I see the value of it. I understand like everyone's running around with their head chopped off. Like we're all very busy and it's difficult to make these connections, but I would be interested and wanting more of a genuine effort from larger institutions and bodies to seek us out. Like we are around, we are plentiful, we're creating really interesting work. But the onus is on the artist to always find a way to present this thing. And I just think there needs to be more changes to the dance ecosystem as a whole, beyond just us creating great work and putting in effort to do so.
I also wanted to shout out to Lisa Gold from the Asian American Arts Alliance, who is a longtime partner of Dance NYC, who's in the chat and who has been a real champion for Asian American choreographers. I think I've either been on panels or had applications from everybody in this on this panel for the J. Dean Wong Award, who is a dance pioneer and ancestor of all of us. So just wanted to give a shout out there. Lisa asked a question about how we can amplify each other's work and how we can be more mindful in terms of supporting each other.
Hi, Keerati speaking. Thank you, Phil. I think events like this are a great start. It's always awesome to come together and share our experiences and where we're at, and also, I don't know, kind of speak up and vouch for each other in ways. So I think having a strong support system here is great, and continue to break barriers and making our voices heard.
Yes, I think definitely, we need to work together. I don't think it's enough, Asians support another Asian group. It's just, I hate to say it, but if you look at the Jewish community, they are so supportive of each other. And you look at the Alvin Ailey dance company, when they perform, it's packed, okay, in the house. You see a lot of Black audience would go. But Asian, first of all, they do not support, arts as much. And when the presenter will present Asian American dance company, for example, you carry an Asian name. And first thing they will think about, when I sell ticket, will this artist attract Asian audience? And then a lot of times they do not buy ticket to go to concerts. So I think the supporting part, we have to, as we are in the dance world, at least we need to support each other. That's a start. And hopefully this concept can be introduced to other community, our own community people, and have them to come out to support art, bring them to the theater. It takes education though, it takes a lot of education. It's a long way to go, but it is important. That's why we do a lot of lecture demonstration. We go to the Chinese immigrant community, the Chinese American schools, to teach the next generation, have them really experience dance. And then when they grow up, they will support dance. My company, a few years ago, we began this Cross Current festival, co-produced with Flash and Town Hall. I think, Phil, you also do a lot of this presenting Asian American choreographer, this kind of activities. And I hope more other Asian American choreographer will come out to host this kind of event to promote Asian American choreographers, especially the young generation. I think that's what I am thinking a lot nowadays, since I am a little bit older now, and then I don't know how many more years I'll be in the field, but I'm really thinking about promoting next generation. Yeah, that's quite a lot of thinking in my mind. Yeah.
A few things to respond to there. First of all, my co-founder, Georgina Paskogan, who's a brilliant soloist at New York City Ballet, we are launching into the next phase of our work with Final Bow for Yellowface to be sort of a hub and a service organization focused on supporting Asian Americans who want to work in dance. So we are looking for other emerging choreographers of Asian descent, pairing them with companies to get commissions, hosting professional development opportunities, so that we can actually dive a little bit deeper into our specific issues. So stay tuned if you want more information about that. But Naini also brought up an interesting point that we often are looked to bring in our own kind into the theaters, like, oh, I'm going to hire an Asian person to bring in an Asian audience. But our work should also resonate with Black audiences. Like, why is the pressure on you to bring in an Asian audience, and why wouldn't a Black audience want to come to see your work as well, or a white audience? And we have to have a white audience, for us to sustain ourselves. So, and as Annie was saying, with presenters, to have to get out of that thinking of these sort of boxes or these monoliths, that maybe all of our work, just because we are Asian, but potentially could appeal to everybody. What a novel thought, right? Any other barriers that could be constructive solutions that you could maybe offer to folks who are listening in the field about how they could be better supportive of Asian American choreographers?
Naini started this, and I'm just kind of echoing and adding on. And something that I actually really appreciate that Asian American Arts Alliance is doing. Hi, Lisa. Is having that artistic mentorship, and that's something for me. I didn't really understand the whole concept of a mentor growing up. Like, how do you seek them out? Like, do you ask them? Do they ask you? How does that work? And I just think there's incredible value in having people who are experienced, but also at various points in their creative career. And like kind of as Keerati was saying, like these types of conversations, again, just really bringing us all together or learning from each other's experiences, I find incredibly helpful.
CJ, what do you think?
I am thinking. This is such a great conversation. I was just thinking about how the audience are, right? About we need to have more Asian audience to support our own kind. But at the same time, like Phil said, how wonderful if we have all kinds of people to join us and to watch the performance and to hear our voice to be heard. At the same time, I'm looking to myself. I felt a little bit isolated with myself, with the Asian community. I felt like that should be a part of my own responsibility as an artist, not only a choreographer, but also artist. Like, that's also part of my responsibility to find a mentor or have meet another artist. And I would just listen to all you guys. I wish I had met you 10 years ago or 5 years ago, and we already started this conversation. And this talk right now are really opening my mind right now, just thinking like, it's such a great way to start the wheel rolling. And we need more talks. We need more of these, more conversations and more voice to be heard. And we just have to keep on going. And maybe not question too much, because the work is there. I think the work is there. We just have to be connected more. And in the end of the day, art is about connections, and it's about uplifting someone's spirit, when they're watching the show, to move that person. And we first have to be moved. We first have to have that connection with each other. If we're only creating art, being isolated, and doesn't matter how good that could be, but if it's not connected, then the message is not going to be heard. So I think it has to start with ourselves to connect more, which is wonderful we're doing this.
Yeah. Great. I just have another comment. Brenda Guha here, who's also a fantastic choreographer and a real leader in our field. And I think a lot of us know her. She says, I feel the Asian community truly needs to come out and support each other, much like folks of other cultures do for their folks. Maybe some internalized assimilation, we can do better. So I think even just having the space like this and even starting to connect with each other. Also, Naini, I don't know if this is an overshare, but we had spoken maybe 6 months ago about how you as a pioneer in the field in many ways can give back and to be a mentor, and how that's something very important to you. So I'm just hearing now remembering your echo of saying this is something you wanted to step up and serve, and hearing also this next generation saying they're hungry for mentors. I'm wondering if now that we have the floor and the stage, this might be a good opportunity to put the call out to the community saying, hey, if we have older Asian American artists out there who want to serve as a mentor, please reach out and send us a note. If we have emerging Asian American choreographers who want to be paired with a mentor, also reach out and maybe we can do some matchmaking. You know, I'm a hopeless matchmaker, so I can't help it. I think it's the Chinese side in me. So maybe this is a good opportunity to think about that. In closing, because we're running out of time, I would just love to kind of do a lightning round with you guys and just hear in a couple sentences what you'd like to see the field look like for Asian Americans in the next 10, 20 years. What would you like the next generation of choreographers coming up to have as their landscape for making work? I'm going to let Naini go last, actually.
Well, sorry, excuse me. Yeah. My hope is that.
She'll go first then.
Yeah, my hope is that we will no longer be put in the box, you know, and we are part of the American culture, part of American dance culture. So no longer being Asian American, but we are the American dance in the dance scene, American dance scene. So people don't have to, you know, separate us or put us in the box anymore. And that's my hope, you know, for the 10 years from now, for the future generation. And they can just be proud of being part of the evolution, the evolvement of American dance culture. Yeah.
Keerati?
That's my hope. Thank you.
Hi, Keerati speaking. I'm thinking, okay, lightning round. I want to see artists, Asian American artists, lead their work unapologetically and with honesty and love, and continuing to do the work to heal ourselves and share ourselves.
Annie?
This is Annie. Might be lofty. I hope and want to see Asian Americans with full-scale commissions in every sector of the dance landscape.
CJ?
Yes, I have lots of hope. I somehow want to see a full Asian cast, like Crazy Rich Asians. And perhaps in the future, that could be more than 5 years, of course, that maybe there's a company that built by an Asian, and it could be like the Dance Theater Harlem or Alvin Ailey, similar to that, but represents Asian. And I think that would be amazing.
Great. Well, I just wanted to once again thank everybody at Dance NYC for holding space for us. I know within the larger scope of things, Asian Americans, we're a small part of the American landscape, but I hope tonight's conversation illuminated that we have a lot of nuance, a lot of diversity within even our own experiences, and there is a need for much, much more. So if you are interested in staying more in touch with the Asian American community, please don't hesitate to reach out. Also, just a reminder that these independent choreographers have all gone through a rough 18-month pandemic. So if there are any donors out there who want to support Dance NYC and these incredible artists, feel free to support all of their individual work. Again, go on to the email that you received to take a look at some of their work samples so you can get to know them as artists. But follow them on social media, go to their shows, write them checks because we need more crazy rich Asians and also crazy non-Asians too, who also have money. So thank you so much. I would be so remiss if I didn't talk about money as a Chinese person. So sorry. Thank you again so much. And Candace, thank you so much for having us. And thank you, Dance NYC.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you, everyone. This is Candace speaking. A huge thanks to the speakers we just had, Annie Heath, Keerati Jinakunwiphat, Chen, Phil Chan, and Zhong-Jing Fang for today's wonderful conversation. It felt like just like family in the house. So really happy that we were able to make this happen. And the Dance NYC could offer our platform for this, this gathering. And thank you to everybody who tuned in on YouTube. We're so happy that you all have been just like avid contributors, offering insight in the chat. Thank you to our interpreters, Gloria Vargas and Pam Pritzker-Ridley from SciNexus. Thank you to our captioner, Julene Bahada from the Viscardi Center, and our amazing chat moderator, Ankita Agarwal, for their invaluable support. Dance NYC's convening is made possible in part by support from Howard Gilman Foundation, the Mertz Gilmore Foundation, and by public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, in partnership with the City Council, the New York State Council on the Arts, and from the National Endowment for the Arts. So anything that we talked about, resources that stayed in the chat, will be posted on the bottom of the event page on our website, dance.nyc. And will also be included in the follow-up email that we'll send to everyone that registered today. The conversation will also stay up on Dance NYC's YouTube for future reference, so feel free to save the link and share it with anybody who missed today's event. If you were here, please fill out our post-event survey. That way we can know how we did, how our programming served you, and the way that it can serve you in the future. That's how we get all of our ideas and, you know, help program our year of convenings. And lastly, join us next week. We have 4 more events in the Redefining Practice series. Next week, we will be here for our town hall, Oceanic Currents, Indigenous Pacific Islander movement artists, weaving together womanist, queer, trans, and progressive Indigenous Pacific movement artists in New York City and the diaspora. And we are trying to strengthen internal and external community ties and further Native dance futures. So that's what we're in for next week. That event is organized and co-moderated by Anthony Ayu and Kaina Kwenga, and curated and co-organized by Ahimsa Timoteo Bodran. So please tune in, tell friends to register for that one. You can visit dance.nyc to find more information. We hope you have a good night and that you join us for the rest of the series. Thank you so much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Good night, New York City Dance.